Hi, everyone. It's Nina Collins, and we're here today talking with Barb White. Oh, you're right, Sydney. I did just get the message. We're here today talking with Barb White, and we titled this conversation "How to Pivot and Figure Out What's Next." Barb is a member of our community. She's a Woolfer. She's a longtime management consultant for many, many years, and she talks in her bio about how she throughout her professional journey, looked to career and life coaches and headhunters and mentors, et cetera. And she's decided to start a business, basically a consulting company that kind of mixes and matches and pulls together what she thinks really works, kind of using her own perspective and experience on how to help people think about where they're going next. So she started something called the Avoca Group to meet this demand and help individuals and startups design and execute strategies for transformation, for moving to that next step. So hi, Barb. Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
thanks for having me.
Nice to meet you. We also featured Barb as a Woolfer of the Week last week, so I know a little bit about her. So what's interesting to me about this is I feel like, particularly for women our age, people are always talking about how to reinvent yourself. And reinvention is really hard. And I feel like I always actually wish we did more content on the subject, but I feel like it's so difficult and I don't want to kind of use a lot of aphorisms and be like, oh, find your passion, and because it's not that easy. And I liked the conversation we had, and I'm hoping that we can kind of have a conversation that helps people. Also, I should preface this by saying we fully acknowledge and understand that a lot of people can't just reinvent themselves. A lot of people can't just sit around. They don't have the luxury to think about what else do I want to do? What's my retirement going to look like? People who are working paycheck to paycheck and are really struggling to just hold it all together. So I fully acknowledge that. And I guess I should say, I think this conversation is probably, hopefully applicable to everyone, but probably generally speaking a little bit more to people who have a little bit more leeway into thinking about what's next, what's purposeful and meaningful, and how they want to spend their time as we get old. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Well, you say older, I say old because I'm more of a pragmatist. but okay, older. How old are you, by the way? I'm 51.
I'm 48.
Okay. All right. So you're a little bit younger than me. So tell me a little bit about why you started this and how you see your business helping people.
Sure. So a little bit of a little bit more to my story is, like Nina said, I've spent 25 years in management consulting, both in like big companies and also in a kind of startup boutique firm. And at the end of 2018, I actually decided to leave that firm where I was an officer of the company and really had helped to build it. And I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do next. And so I took some time off, what I call like my adult gap year, which I, by the way, planned for, saved for, did all of that. But I really wanted to spend some time trying to figure out what I wanted to do with maybe the next 25 years. I had done the same thing basically for so long. I wasn't even sure what I could do or what was possible. So I really tried to give myself a little bit of like bandwidth, a little bit of time to really explore different things. And as you mentioned, I reached out to lots and lots of different people, from headhunters to coaches to friends and other colleagues, got some great advice. But the approaches that they were using didn't suit me, right? So headhunters didn't work for me at that time because I didn't really know what I wanted to do next. And kind of the coaches that I knew and had worked with before, they weren't as kind of directive as I kind of wanted them to be. So I was kind of stuck in the middle in a way. And so I kind of created an approach for myself that I thought blended a lot of my experience with corporate strategy and kind of behavioral science and some of the other techniques that I've used. And that's how I kind of charted my own path. And go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but so presumably this plan that you kind of created for yourself led you to this, right? It led
exactly. And so through a series of like realizations, one of which was I didn't want to work for anybody else anymore. So I wanted to have my own business. And I really do enjoy working more one-on-one and more small groups. So I wanted to kind of get out of the corporate enterprise type of work I was doing and really focus on more of a personal level. So it's taking us a lot of the similar skills that I had built and just applying them to a new thing.
Interesting. All right. So let's pretend, say, you're doing this with me, just to kind of get like, let's give us a sense a little bit of how you do it. I mean, you
Sure.
you work with companies and you work with individuals, but I think for the sake of this conversation, let's assume you're talking to so many of our members, right, who are women in their 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, also 40s, obviously, but this probably isn't. Well, this might apply to them
Oh,
as
it might.
well. But yeah, I mean, women. I think I read when I took one of my daughters to tour colleges. I remember the president of Wesleyan said that people nowadays, or maybe our kids going forward, will have an average of 7 different
Yeah,
careers, which seemed like a lot of
it
careers, but
does.
I
Yeah.
myself have had quite a few, at least 3 or 4, and I'm not done yet. I'm 51. So someone comes to you, and actually I wanted to say that your adult gap year, we have a lot of members who have done that. I'm thinking of one in particular, a member from Indianapolis who I met when we did a retreat at Joshua Tree, and she'd come from big corporate America and was doing exactly what you described and kind of exploring lots of things. And it's
Yeah.
hard, right? It's
It's
hard
hard.
being in that place of I don't know, and who am I, and am I
Mhm.
irrelevant, and how am I going to redefine myself?
Exactly.
So I certainly have been there. Maybe I am there. I don't know. Um, but so what would you do with an individual who comes to you at first?
Sure. So the first thing we do in every engagement, so it doesn't matter if you're a startup founder, if you're trying to figure out what your unretirement looks like, or just a regular old like career type pivot, we always start with a values assessment, right? So you've probably done these before in your life and your career, and that's great, but it's good to do them periodically because things change. So the things that were important to you 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they may no longer be those priorities for you. So it's always a good kind of foundation.
It's so
Um,
completely true. I
yeah.
did a life coaching certificate course a bunch of years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I learned about values assessments, and it was one of my favorite tools.
Mhm.
And the idea, simply for anyone who's listening and hasn't done one, is, I mean, the way I did it was you took a piece of paper that had a million values listed from A to Z, and you can choose the one or the five that speak to you right now. Like when you focus on your life right now and think about the next year, what are the words that mean the most to you? Um, and it really is interesting how much it changes from
It
year to
does,
year.
right? So, I mean, there's so many transitions in your life that kind of change your perspective and change your priorities. And so again, it's always a good idea to do those things. And those types of tools are not difficult to do, right? They're easy in the way, but they really require you to think about it and to really be a little bit more introspective. So I tell people like take elapsed time to do it. Like it might take you 10 minutes to actually fill it out, but go back to it and like think about it some more. And then I actually want them to really articulate what does that look like in practice, right? So if you've chose social impact, what does that look like to you, like in your day-to-day life? Like how does that manifest? Because I think then that helps give people some clarity as to like, okay, it's not just that I care about it, but I want to make it part of my life.
Right, part of my
And
everyday
yeah,
life.
and it helps you to identify where there might be some gaps with your current choices.
Yeah. Can you share with us, for example, what one of your values is?
Sure. So one of my values has been health.
Mhm.
And that can definitely mean lots of things to lots of people. But one of the things I've been trying to do for myself is do, I'm going to say self-care. That
Mhm.
term seems to be a bit overused, but just focusing more on what's important to my long-term health, right? Making sure I sleep enough, making sure that I'm eating right. So those
Yeah.
are things that are important to me. Saying no to things that maybe are going to be too draining or really distract me from things that are important.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, because, and I mean, I know that self-care is overused, but I think it's such an important concept. And so it's not one of those that has bothered me yet. Pivot, correct. Used. But as I was thinking about my values, like I remember the last time I did this a few years ago, I remember the word fulfillment was super
Mm,
important to me. But now the first word that came to mind, just thinking about it, is calm, which speaks a
yes.
little bit to health, right? And probably speaks to also getting older. Like it's just super important to me in my life now that I not have drama.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Yeah. And cutting. Yeah. And so maybe the answer to that, the action that comes out of that assessment, that values assessment is how do I reduce the drama? How do
right.
I cut things out of my life that are maybe,
Yeah.
preventing me from feeling that calm that I really
Then
want.
also, I have to say, hearing you say social impact, like I want to do a values assessment because I think social impact also speaks to me now in a way that I don't think it for me wouldn't have a few years ago. Like I do feel at this point at
Well,
50.
it's interesting. I have several like 30 something clients, and it's one of them that comes up a lot more on their values assessment than it may on my generation. So I do think it's maybe a little bit more generational, to see
Interesting.
what's more important to people.
Huh. I think I feel now like I have a degree of wisdom. I mean, I don't know that much, but something
Yeah.
that I want to share and be able to help in the world if I can. But I also have to be calm. Okay, so go on. So you do the values
Right. So we
assessment.
do the values.
And
And again,
do people pick one word, many words? Do they talk about it? Do they write about it?
sure. So the way I like to do it is it's top five, and you can rank them, and you can do what is called the 100 pennies exercise, where you allocate 100 pennies across those five things, and that helps to kind of gauge relative importance. And so, if you put 80 pennies in number one, that clearly means that's very important to you, versus if you put 20 pennies on each of the five.
Right.
So it just is a different way to kind of measure and gauge the relative importance. And then I have them actually spend time writing out, what does this look like in practice?
Mm-hmm.
And do that in as many phrases, sentences as you can to capture it.
Yep.
And then it's kind of a little bit of a gap analysis. So bringing in my corporate stuff into it, right? So understanding, like, this is what's important to me, this is what my priorities are. Look at your choices, your life, your career, etc. Where is it not kind of syncing up? And that helps us to identify some of the areas that we can then move forward on and say, okay, let's explore these some more. Let's potentially put these kind of in an action plan if you want to actually close that gap. And maybe you're not able to do it all right now, but it's
But
something that you can think about.
yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan, as some of the people in the community know, of using reflective writing as a way
Mhm.
to understand where you are.
Sure.
So I would think writing down kind of what those values mean to you and how you could imagine them playing out in your life. Like that's hard to do, actually. It's not so
It is hard to do.
yeah.
And again, like you got to be, it works when you're willing to really open yourself up and
Yeah.
think about it and be true.
And it also
Um,
kind of speaks a little bit, maybe, I don't know if this is too new agey for you, but to the whole idea of manifestation, right? Like, and I wonder where you find yourself on that
So
concept.
it's funny you mentioned that. So I'm definitely on the spectrum, like more of the rational, logical thinker. And so I just had this conversation with a client. There's a neuroscientist that I took a class from years ago, and I like her writings. And she just wrote about um, the idea of like the old vision board,
Hmm.
which
Yep.
I had always kind of been like, no, that's too like touchy feely, too new agey for me. But she's starting to convince me, because she's put the science behind actually how, visualizing what you want helps kind of prime your brain to help you achieve it. So I sent it to my client and I said, look, this might be not your thing, or this might be just the thing to
Yeah.
kind of get you, in the right mindset to really think about what's next.
Yeah, I always feel like there's a weird element of magic to vision boards, and I kind of feel like you do. Like I'm a little more grounded in kind of practicality, but I've seen it particularly like with women in relationships. Like if you really get very clear on what you're looking for and how you, not what you want, like does he make this much amount of money or does she, I don't know, climb mountains, but how you want to feel with someone, how you want to
Mm.
feel in your life in that next phase of your life. I do kind of believe that you can bring things towards you. So
Yeah, and there's again, I tend to be geared towards the science. I like to understand how things work, and there's definite neuroscience behind the act of being tactile, of using your hands to either write something out on a piece of paper or put it on a board, or doing something that's using more than just your brain. It's using your hands. It's using something more creative that
mhm.
helps, kind of plant more of the seeds. So there is something to that. So I'm becoming more of a late adopter to that
Yeah.
whole idea.
we were supposed to have a Woolfer vision board workshop in March, right? I think the same weekend that everything shut down, March 14th. But now we have one scheduled, I think on November 1st, right before the election. We're doing a digital vision board with someone who somehow knows how to do it online, which I'm kind of super excited
Oh,
about.
yeah, cool.
So, okay, so you have people write up their
Mhm.
values assessment, use the pennies exercise. The 100 pennies exercise is a good tip. I like that. And then what's next?
Yeah, and then so that's the results of that is really kind of what I say is like the lens through which you're going to view everything else.
Mhm.
So let's say you're, looking at your unretirement and you're trying to figure out, do I want to sail around the world, for a couple of years, or do I want to open a bagel shop?
Mhm.
Right. So you've got these ideas in your head, but you're not really sure which is the right one for you. And not saying you can't do all of it. Maybe you can do all of it. So then we want them to really kind of put together what we call a structured exploration plan.
Mhm.
And I use those two words very purposely. I'm a big fan of structure. We kind of talked about that. I like having a plan. I like having, actions that people can kind of hold themselves accountable to. But I'm also a fan of pure exploration
Mhm.
and the idea that you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
And so spending some, intense, dedicated time. And again, you don't have to take a year off like I did. You can do this on a weekend, like 30 minutes on a Saturday morning before your life starts to get crazy. You can do this on your next vacation.
Mhm.
But to really kind of, expand your network, right? So Adam Grant, who's a Wharton professor, has a great suggestion, and he refers to it as dormant or weaker ties. And he says, you're really going to find the most interesting opportunities when you get outside your normal network of people, your usual suspects. And so tap into that person that you haven't talked to since college. Talk to your neighbors about something other than your kid's soccer match and really try to understand like what else is out there that may be a possibility for me, and do that pure exploration and weave that back into your plan. You'll weave it through rejecting some of it, like, okay, that's not for me.
Right.
But the good nuggets that you find, you might say, I want to explore that even more.
So that's interesting. I've heard of this idea of dormant or weaker ties, but I've never thought about it in this context really. So like if you're weighing, do I open a bagel store or do I go back to school?
Right.
Go talk to people you don't know as well, because I'm always consulting. I'm a big kind of
Mhm.
crowdsourcer, as a lot of you probably know, although people super close to me tease me that I like to crowdsource and then I do what I want to do anyway. But I don't really think about crowdsourcing so much like outside of my circle, so that's kind of an interesting idea. Why
Yeah,
is why
I
is
mean,
that helps?
sorry.
No, I'm wondering why the weaker ties, do you
So
know?
because I think if you're looking for different ideas, right? So
Mhm.
maybe you don't know what you want to do next, right? Maybe you're like, hey, I just feel like I want to move on, like it's time, but
Mhm.
I'm not really sure what else I want to do.
Mhm.
Then that's where I think it's really valuable. So by kind of getting outside. So for example, I had a client recently and he's in that position where he knows he wants to do something different. He just doesn't know what it is yet. And if you look at his LinkedIn profile and first degree connections, it's probably like mine. Maybe yours is different, but it's generally the same types of people in the same career, people that you probably know. And so I'm only going to get so much insight
Right.
from those
It's not going
people.
to be very diverse. Right.
Right.
It's going to be kind of more.
Exactly. So being more diverse. So how do you as an individual tap into that diversity? You can cold call people, and I'm also a fan of that. But if you don't want to do that, then it's a chance to say, hey, maybe I just, again, call up that person I haven't talked to in 10 years and find out what they're doing. And I don't know what they're doing, but maybe it's going to be something interesting. And maybe they're going to suggest that I talk to somebody else. And it just kind of moves on from there.
So really, I think the takeaway for me there is just ever widening your network, right? Always being willing to talk to more people and reaching kind of outside your comfort zone to ask questions.
Exactly. And make informed decisions. So even if you think you're very clear about what you want, this is especially when we talk about kind of retirement, this is one of the cautions that I give to people. Like, you might think you want to play golf every day or sail around the world or open that bagel shop.
Mm-hmm.
But you should probably validate that before you make the jump.
Mm-hmm.
This vision, this idea of this awesome life that you're going to have, how real is it? As an example, this was told to me by someone else, friend of theirs, was an attorney in a firm, had retired. He loved playing golf. He's like, I'm going to play golf. That's going to be my retirement. And he realized not only did he not really enjoy playing golf every day because it was boring and he missed a lot of the intellectual stimulation of work, but he's like, I physically can't do it.
So I have to do something else, right? That's not
my body will not allow me to do it every day.
So what did he end up doing?
He went back to the firm.
Oh,
So
interesting.
yeah. So just making informed choices.
Yeah. So I want to keep going down this path, but I want to stop for a second and ask you, just tell us a little bit about your unretirement concept.
Sure.
Why did you come up with that? What does it mean?
Yeah. So we like the word unretirement for a couple of reasons. One is that a lot of people have a kind of visceral negative response to the word retirement. Either they think like, I'm too young, like, don't talk to me about that. And also, as we mentioned earlier, for most people, the idea of no longer having to work for money, which is what I think of when I think of retirement, is just not a possibility for them.
Right.
And or there's a lot of people who just don't want to stop working. They love to work and they want to keep doing it in some fashion. Maybe it's going to be different, but they don't envision kind of the traditional, play golf every day type of retirement. So we chose that word because we think it's more inclusive. It can like cover lots of different options and models.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of really, what do I want to do next? What do I want to do as I get older? What do I want to do in this next phase of my life?
Exactly. And so we have a webinar we do, and it's called Unretirement, the Ultimate Career Pivot. And so you can think about it as simply that. It's just the next career pivot.
Yeah. God, I don't know what my next career pivot's going to be.
I don't know. It'd be interesting to see.
Do you think this is your last pivot?
I can't imagine it is. And that's like you said before. I mean, I had two employers for 25 years. Mm-hmm. So I'm not one that has kind of jumped around, but I also became much more comfortable with the idea that, if I do this for the next couple of years and then stop doing it and do something else, that'll be fine too.
Right. I think being comfortable with that. All right. So I remember there are 4 pillars that you talk about. Can you talk about what those are?
Sure. So, and this applies to really anybody, not just to the unretirement folks, but one of the things that we realized, and we did a bunch of research over the summer, we did our own kind of customer discovery and interviews and surveys, and everyone gets what we consider 4 non-financial benefits from their work life. And when I say work life, that also includes, caregivers and full-time parents, like whatever your work is, you're in this bucket. And so those 4 things are purpose, identity, community, and structure. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that you have to get all of those things satisfied via work. In fact, that's probably not healthy if you do. Mm-hmm. But there are
things in your life.
Yeah. So if you assume that each of them equal 100%, what percentage do you get from work and what percentage do you get from non-work? Mm-hmm. And so if you're considering making a pretty big change, I think it behooves you to really think about that ratio. And if you are going to leave a career behind or leave another situation behind, are you going to have to replace that in some way? Mm-hmm. So you mentioned identity before.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think how this, just because it's easy, I'm trying to use myself. I'm trying to think about how this applies to me, right? Like right now, my purpose really has been kind of elevating the voice of interesting women and creating this community in this place where we can learn from each other and feel validated and feel more normal, right? And not feel ashamed about getting older. And it's certainly given me a lot of identity because I am the leader of this community, right? So that's how I identify now. And it's certainly given me a ton of community.
Yeah.
And it gives me a good amount of structure. And for me, kind of the right amount. Like sometimes we think as we go forward, we really have to either get bought by someone or find an investor so that we have more money to really make this business work. And I'm a little wary of how that will affect my structure, the structure of my
Mhm.
life. Because right now I work for myself. I have a full-time assistant. I kind of come and go. I can take time off if I need to. You know, I control my day much more.
Right.
Do I want it to be much more structured? And I'm not always so sure. So that's like my example in thinking about what you're talking about. Like if
Mhm.
I were to think about something, and that makes it sound like, well, what I'm doing right now is it serves me pretty well in all of those ways, right?
Right.
So if I were, say, I don't know, running a bookstore right now, which is another fantasy of mine, I would have to look at that and think about the ways. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to understand how you apply those four ideas.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So it's first understanding, understanding how much of those things are tightly coupled with your current, let's say, career, right? Because that's primarily what we're talking about, is making a change in your career. And so if if your identity is Nina Collins, like moderator, founder of, the Woolfer, and you walked away from that, what would you replace it with? And
Mhm.
maybe it would be easy. So for an example, we asked all of our participants to kind of rank those and ask them to say, which one of the four do you think is most tightly coupled with your work life? And 65% of people said purpose.
Oh, interesting.
It is interesting. There are limitations to a survey question. So I will say, from my own personal experience, I also picked purpose because I put myself through the same paces. But when I actually made the transition, I found that was not difficult to replace. I found it was pretty easy to find new purpose. The one I did really struggle with was structure.
Because, well, that
Because
makes sense for you because you're going from a corporate life to working for yourself, which is super hard. Right.
I didn't anticipate it being hard, but yes, it is.
Very
Because,
difficult to
yeah,
be, which is actually my fear. Like, I'm afraid if we get an investor or get someone to buy us, then I'm going to be going from an entrepreneurial life to a corporate life.
right.
And I've almost never worked for anyone before. And so that scares me because I think those
Right.
are
So, I
big.
mean, so in a way, you just answered your question. So, if you were trying to decide, do I do that? Do I, take what many people consider the next step of an entrepreneur lifestyle to like be more corporate?
Right.
Are you willing to make those trade-offs?
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Because I would feel like, I don't know. I almost feel like for me, purpose, identity, and community are almost all equal, but the structure piece is a little bit more of like the fuzzy piece for me.
Yeah. And as an example, because I live down here in the DC area, lots of folks work for the government, work for nonprofits, NGOs. So there's a lot of people who are very connected personally to the mission of that organization.
Right.
So for them, that might be a more challenging, barrier to overcome if I left, this organization that I feel so strongly about their mission.
Right.
Like, what is that going to do? And
Right.
am I going to have to find some other mission to support, or or is it going to be easier? I had a client who is a very successful, senior executive, and we were talking about the purpose question, and she's like, well, maybe my purpose is just going to be to make people happy. And I thought, okay, that sounds great.
Well, and also like you talked about, one of your values right now being around health. So that's a much more private purpose, right?
Sure.
It's so the purpose doesn't always have to be so outward facing, right?
No, no. And a lot of people would say, if you ask them to identify themselves, right? Unfortunately, we live in a culture, and particularly those of us kind of in the East Coast, right, where within minutes of meeting someone, they're going to ask you what you do for a living.
Right.
But a lot of people don't really see themselves that way, right? So they might say, I'm a dad, I'm a mom. That's my primary identity. And so the work stuff is great, but it's not what's important to me. So that's not as big of a condition when I'm looking at what comes next.
All right. So I guess my next question is like, this seems very, like, I thought about becoming a transition coach and a life coach, and it seems hard to me to get to help people move to that next place is not easy. Like a lot of what you're talking about makes a lot of sense, but do you find that a lot of your clients are still stuck? Like, I mean, how often do people really get from A to D?
I think they do. So I can't promise a specific outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not dissimilar from my work in kind of corporate strategy, where sure, I can put together a great strategy and a plan and a roadmap for you, but the hard work is on you to do. And often my role is, again, kind of giving you tools and kind of guidance and some accountability.
Right.
Honestly, whether it's, the folks we've been talking about, or even like the startups that I work with, a lot of what I find I do is like confidence building.
Mhm.
Like you can do this, like you
Right.
can make this change, and helping them translate their value into whatever the next thing is.
Well, that in and of itself, I mean, is certainly really valuable, right? Identifying your values, understanding like this idea, thinking through this idea of purpose, identity, community structure, like what really does matter to you.
Mhm.
And then certainly the accountability, right? I would imagine people, your clients talk to you once a week or whatever, and it's you're keeping them on track to kind of
Mhm.
think about this plan. Um, but it is I would be very curious to like understand how many people, because I don't see that many people really pivoting in life, like in a
Okay.
kind of dramatic way. I mean, you see a lot of people changing careers over time, but often it feels kind of organic and slow. So I'm just kind of interested in, I mean, I should hire someone like you, coach. And I've often wondered like how, where would it take me? So anyway, I'm just kind of interested in how frustrating or satisfying you're finding it. What are the pitfalls for you in doing this kind of work?
I think so it is satisfying. I mean, that's one of the reasons I kind of decided to go in this direction, because I do very much like working one-on-one and helping people,
Yeah.
make those changes. And part of that challenge for me is understanding the client and understanding what's going to help them either kind of push through like the frustrating parts of the process,
Hmm.
or overcome some barriers. And so I get to kind of exercise my kind of tools and skills and
Yeah.
expertise in that way. So for me, it's valuable. But no, I'd say the clients do actually make changes. They do get new jobs and new careers, and make decisions. And sometimes that decision is to kind of stay where they are.
Uh-huh. Right. Which is fair
Right.
enough, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes people realize that actually where they are is good.
Right.
Yeah.
Or one of the things that I think I encourage people to do, which I'm finding is, it surprises me that more people don't do this. So maybe like plug for viewers, um, ask for what you want.
Yes.
So, you might be in an organization and you don't love the role that you're in, or you have a crappy boss, or something's bothering you and is like the thing that made you call me to begin with.
Mhm.
But there might be a solution to the problem that doesn't involve a radical change.
Mhm.
So sometimes if you ask for something, you will get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's one thing that I've really noticed in the community, or maybe just as I get older, but for a lot of people, just identifying really what they want is the
Mhm.
hardest part. And that's probably something that working with you is super helpful to do, right? Because through values, through talking about these four pillars, you're kind of honing in on what's missing, what you're craving, what you
Yeah.
need. And
And sometimes it is just pain points, right? So
yeah.
sometimes it is like, I'm just in a really shitty position right now, and I don't like my team, I don't like my boss, and I feel like I'm trapped.
Right, right. And that feeling of being trapped is absolutely awful. And having someone kind of help you see your way through it, as
Right.
you say, whether it's making a complete change or whether making a smaller change. But I think
Mhm.
being able to identify what you're missing and having the courage to say it, and ask for things is really
Mhm.
important. And I can imagine that must be really satisfying to help people do that.
It is. And I really enjoy it. I love watching people kind of be successful in that way. And I like feeling like I've had some impact.
Yeah, yeah. And are you getting clients? Is it mostly word of mouth? Is it referral? Is it from your old network?
Yeah, all of the above. I mean, we're not, we're still small business. We've only been around, this year. So, COVID startup.
Yeah, yeah.
um, Yeah, so it's been great. It's it's initially my network and then some word of mouth, and we do a series of kind of webinars. So
Yeah.
we get a lot of folks, some of them woofers, who have come through there and have had conversations with us, and not all of them turn into clients, but I've had some really interesting conversations with several. So
Yeah.
often we'll offer a little complimentary chat to kind of help them get started on their thinking process.
That's
And
great.
it's really
I think
fun.
I think maybe it would be a really fun thing to do a values workshop. I think we should think
Great.
about maybe doing that with the Wolfers because I think it's a satisfying exercise. And I
It
also
is.
like, do you do any of those like pie chart exercises where you don't?
No,
Is that too coachy?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm
Okay.
not familiar with it, so I can't
Okay.
say.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Um,
kind of it's thinking about like similar to what you were talking about in terms of purpose, identity, community structure, but thinking about like where you're not putting enough of your energy in your life, right? What things are it's related to values. So anyway, maybe we can call on you to help do a
we
value
sure can. Happy
exercise with us.
to.
That'd be really fun.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you. Is there anything that about what you do that we didn't get to that would be important to talk about? It's super
Um,
interesting to think about this work.
no, I think I just want to leave people with just a couple of thoughts, right?
Yeah,
So one
please.
of the things that we always talk about in particularly the webinars is, maybe you're not ready for that big change. Maybe you're not ready to retire or whatever the next phase might be, but there are probably smaller changes you can make now.
Like,
Like anything. Like, so the example I give is retirement. No, we're talking about retirement quite a bit, but we all know people in our lives, friends, family, who said, well, when we retire, we're going to do all the things we always wanted to do, and they kind of have this just amazing life planned for themselves
right, the
for after
travel.
this time.
Yeah,
And then life happens
right.
and they don't ever get to do it. So that kind of breaks my heart a little bit. And
Yeah.
maybe I evangelize too much about it, but I really want to encourage people, see what you can pull forward into the now, even if it's as simple as I want to take a trip.
I
I want to
completely agree. It's
hike the Shenandoah, whatever the thing is, like, don't wait.
no, one of my mottos always when people ask me what my motto is, this is kind of banal, but it really is the first thing that comes to mind is why do later what you can do now?
Yeah.
Like life is short, and
Life
if it's
is
something you
short.
want to do, you should try and figure out how to make
Yeah.
it
And
happen.
particularly with work, like we spend a lot of our waking hours at work.
Yeah.
So you might as well do something you like.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, that's a great tip. Anything else?
No, that's a good way to good way
That's
to
a
end
good
it.
way to wrap up. Yeah,
Yeah.
really nice to meet you, Barb, in
Nice
person.
to meet
Nice
you
to
too.
see you.
This was a lot of
And
fun.
I'm excited for your company. And we'll keep talking and finding other ways to work together. So for everyone who's listening, it's the Avoca Group, AVOKA, theavocagroup.com. And Barb White, and she goes by Barb, not
Yeah.
Barbara, is a Wolfer and a member of the community. And you can find her that way. And you can also always email me, Nina at the Woolfer. And thank you so much for spending this time. It's
It was
helpful
my
to me.
pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.